Hey fans, did you know that Dash is the only digital auction platform built specifically for professional sports teams and their fan bases? It is also your place to score your favorite hockey team's most authentic memorabilia and game day experiences. Dash powers the auctions for your favorite AHL, ECHL, SPHL, NAHL, and USHL hockey clubs, plus many more across sports. Get in on the bidding now by texting DASH to 66866 or visit thesendbin.net and click on the word auctions in the upper right corner to find out the latest hockey auctions. Dash, making sports bidding so much easier in the digital age. This episode of the In the Corners podcast is sponsored by Sporfy, the sports video platform that allows you to instantly capture, replay, and share your favorite game highlights, all without having to film. For more information, visit sporfy.com or download the mobile app from the Google Play Store or the App Store.
Bringing you the only weekly podcast dedicated to the ECHL. This is In the Corners podcast. Now your host, CC Hawkley.
Good afternoon from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Wayne, New Jersey.
My name is CC Hawkley.
And I'm Sean O'Brien.
This is the In the Corners podcast for Monday, May 25th, 2020. Welcome to episode 85 of the Good Ship In the Corners for all of our American listeners. And we hope you have a good Memorial Day weekend and enjoying your Memorial Day that this episode is airing. For those who gave their lives in service to the United States, we do thank you, because there's a lot of military folks that have done that over the years. I know my grandfather served in both World War II and Vietnam. So, yeah, that's definitely a holiday near and dear to my heart. So thank you. Wanted to definitely make it a point to say that before we got into all of the hockey talk. So, with that said, Wayne, New Jersey, Sean O'Brien, again back on the show. Last time we spoke earlier this month of May, he was in Pennsylvania. So, okay, you've settled in from your move from Georgia to Pennsylvania. Now, why are you in Wayne, New Jersey?
So I'm actually in Jersey right now, staying with my future in-laws as we're preparing to have the wedding here. I'm getting married on the 6th. What was supposed to be a very big to-do is now been scaled down dramatically, thanks COVID-19. But we are planning to basically decorate the house here the best we can. Our ceremony is going to have about 9-10 people involved total. We're going to be, staying apart from each other. People are going to have masks on, and then we're going to have as many people on Zoom as we can to celebrate with us. But yeah, what was going to be about 200 people, we managed to get down to like under 10, I believe it is at this point. So yeah, it's going to be different, but we're still planning on having the big reception and stuff in January, if possible. If it's not possible in January, we'll push it back later. But we are definitely getting married on June 6th, this not this upcoming Saturday, but the Saturday after that.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I mean, I know of certain instances of people that are, having kids. I see it quite a bit on Facebook. There's a few of my friends that have had children during this pandemic, but to get married, I know that's something that can be shuffled around a little bit, but man, to have a set date and to, tinker with that so that you can have, the ceremony and everything. Like you said, normal wedding, about 200 people sounds about right. People from each side of the family and friends and things like that. But to whittle that down to 10 and to do it with masks and social distancing and things like that, man, that's just, yeah, it's, I don't want to say the new normal, but it's the normal that we kind of have had to adjust to in these times.
Yeah, and it's, going from a wedding venue that was capable of doing basically everything there. The ceremony was going to be at the venue, the reception, all of the things that go along with that. Like, to shift all of that to, a residential house and trying to still get pictures and do all of that has been quite a challenge. But we're doing the best we can with what we got. It's all really anyone can ask from us.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, you got to make do with what you have during these crazy times, which definitely are going to play into the conversations we'll have later on in the podcast about, gosh, not just the AHL and the ECHL, which we mainly focus on, but of course the national, the NHL as well. We'll kind of dive into that here in a second. But I did want to ask you before we got started on all those topics, are there any new projects that you personally are working on in the past 3 weeks that we haven't done an episode rather?
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned this last time, but being that my name is Sean O'Brien, I've taken up to learning the Irish language on Rosetta Stone. We're planning to go to Ireland for the honeymoon whenever international travel is allowed and we can afford to make it. But I thought it made sense to learn some native language, despite the fact that I'm sure probably everyone speaks English anyway. But it's been a fun adventure learning to speak Irish.
Now, when you say learning to speak Irish, are you talking about Gaelic?
Gaelic is actually a separate language. It's similar, like there is some overlap. I've seen some of the translations between Irish and like Scots Gaelic, and some words are similar, but there are definitely distinct differences in the like grammar and stuff like that. So even though I can say maybe 10 things at this point, I've looked at some of like the translate options because people have asked me that too. They're like, "You just mean Gaelic?" I'm like, "No, there is an actual Irish language."
Today I learned.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I wish I could say that I was learning a new language, but uh, for on my end, I just really, gosh, in the past 3 weeks, I mean, the weather's been getting better here in Denver. It's a little overcast today. It did rain last night, but again, we're recording this on a Sunday, so if the weather is different in Denver for listeners, then you'll know why. But we did get our fire pit up and going. It was our first fire of of 2020, and so it was nice to just sit out back on Friday night and just burn, just a nice little campfire. And bummer we didn't get any s'mores or anything, but yeah, we're definitely gonna have to grab some hot dogs and the s'more stuff next time. But I'll say this before we get started as well. In the hockey realm, I did publish a number of articles and had a really good interview. Being a Penn State graduate yourself, you'll appreciate this. Did talk to head coach Guy Godowski of the Penn State men's hockey program, and got to pick his brain a little bit about the Colorado Eagles' newly signed goaltender. He signed a 2-year AHL deal with the Eagles, Peyton Jones, and man, I'm kind of hyped to have him in the market and to cover him. Especially after talking with Coach Godowski. I mean, it's always fun to interview coaches outside of the realm of professional hockey and in more in collegiate programs. It was a really cool thing to do. And that wasn't really a project, but it was definitely an article and a piece that I was proud of. And it was good to kind of get to know Peyton a little more. After, looking at video clips and stuff of him, he's an outstanding, incredibly athletic goaltender, as Coach Godowski said. So
Yeah, and having gotten to see him play a little bit at Penn State, I can definitely say that he is a quality goaltender. I think I was surprised to see that he signed with Colorado just because it seemed like they had a lot of depth at goalie, but he definitely belongs at that level of goaltender.
yeah, and I think that I was kind of flummoxed to use a big word. I was kind of befuddled a little bit to see him added on an AHL deal when you've got Philip Grubauer, Pavel Francouz up at the NHL level, and then of course you've got Hunter Miska, but his contract is expiring. Antoine Bibeau, he didn't get a real chance to play with the Eagles this season, but then you've also got, gosh, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out all the goaltenders that are in the system. Adam Werner, the Swedish guy. Yes. So yeah, I mean, they're obviously going to be letting one or two of those guys go. And Peyton Jones is a good fill-in for whoever they let go. But anyway, yeah, that's That was an exciting article, and it was an interesting tie. And I'd forgotten that you graduated from Penn State, so I'm like, oh, I got to bring this up on the podcast. So,
Oh yeah, I'm very proud of my alma mater. Every year they raise about $10 million for pediatric cancer, an event called Thon, which is a big source of pride for our university. So I went there for 4 years. I graduated there, and to me, part of State College will always be home. So yeah, during football season. I'm sure if you see my Twitter timeline, you will see more examples and not forget I'm a Penn Stater.
sure. Once everything gets back to normal, I definitely won't forget in that aspect for sure. But that's awesome that your university, man, that's great, a great cause. And any cause that any college or cause that can donate to cancer related treatments and things like that is awesome in my book. So I'm glad you brought that up. All right. So here we go. There's a lot to cover on this podcast. So we'll try to run through it as quick as we can while doing a thorough job at it. So first and foremost, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that you've got the NHL and NHLPA trying to negotiate a return to not regular season play. They've kind of moved on from that, but to install a 2014 playoff format. And the NHLPA did approve talks to further negotiate this on Friday, to move forward and discuss the format further with the NHL. What's going to happen is the first few games, it's going to be kind of like, I guess, like the wild card format in baseball, and I guess the NFL as well. I mean, the NFL, you play one game and you either win or lose, and that's it. But I guess baseball is a little more akin to what the NHL is going to be doing. You have these quote unquote wild card play-in games, and then the first round is going to be a best of 5 series. So they're kind of hearkening back to that. And then the rest of the series would be a best of 7. And they're still discussing, hub cities, where each division or each conference is going to meet in centralized locations. And then you've also, of course, got health and safety concerns and accommodation to be discussed. So nothing is official as of yet. Man, Sean, what's your opinion about all this? What do you think about, the NHL and the NHLPA still trying to salvage the season when you've got the AHL, ECHL, and SPHL, obviously all gate-driven leagues, but they've all canceled their seasons, and the NHL is still gonna try and push through.
I mean, it's not surprising because it's at least theoretically possible for the NHL because they have TV rights and stuff like that. And they've seen that, basically anything of sports right now is just being gobbled up by anyone who can. I've actually watched Korean baseball a little bit just to have some semblance of sport. But that's something that the AHL, ECHL, and SPHL can't do because they don't have really TV contracts or that kind of revenue stream. But the format, I'm given all of the handicaps and everything that's going on, it seems like it's probably the best that they can do. I'm especially glad that they didn't try to drag back San Jose and Ottawa and Detroit and LA and be like, hey guys, come risk your health and safety to play in games that will get you absolutely nothing.
Right.
I'm glad that they decided to cut some teams out just for the sake of your season is over and you want that too. But I'm surprised they didn't stretch to find a way to get Buffalo in just for TV ratings. But at the same time, I guess they had to cut the line somewhere, and it sucks that it's at Buffalo, who is exactly team number 25. But I think no matter what happens, there's going to be an asterisk next to this cup, just based on the hey, this cup was won under wildly different circumstances and different rules. Does that cheapen it or lessen the value of it? I don't think so, but it still gets to be demarcated as not the same circumstances.
Well, I mean, you've got somebody pointed out on social media, you've got lockout shortened seasons as well that, obviously don't have an asterisk next to them. And so in all sports, I mean, you've got the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, all of those seasons. I think the NFL too. I think the NFL, I want to say maybe back in the 80s, had a lockout shortened season, or maybe even the early 90s. But yeah, I mean, you don't have asterisks next to them. But my main concern And I'll try and wrap this up pretty quick so we can go on to AHL and ECHL talk, but obviously NHL is, kind of important too. But, obviously you've got different circumstances here because of a pandemic. And that's the thing is that, if a team, if COVID-19 is detected in a locker room or with a team, that could throw a wrench into a lot of stuff. Like you get a star player going down because of COVID-19, or you get a whole team that is unfortunately affected by it. I'm sure that they're going to take, meticulous measures in sanitizing and cleaning and everything like that. But the fact is, that's my main concern about an asterisk being next to a champion is like if there's a team that's building momentum and then all of a sudden, I guess you could compare it to like an actual, injury on the ice. But this is unprecedented. This is in my opinion, just a little different than that.
Yeah, and one of the interesting points I heard brought up too is, should some player get seriously injured, like they, block a shot and break a foot or whatever, and they have to go to the hospital for x-rays. How's that going to work? If they're all isolated in hotels and in this hub city where they're in a bubble league, basically, does that bubble league include, hospital visits and x-ray facilities? Because that's going to be something they have to think about. And then I'm sure they're going to be, testing the crap out of the players and staff and everyone inside the league that's involved in these kind of bubbles. But then, what's their plan for what happens when someone inevitably tests positive? And I'm sure that they're thinking about that too. But like, I have no idea what that answer could look like. Do we quarantine everyone that they could have come in contact with for 14 days? How many people could that possibly be? The answer is probably a lot. So what happens then? Do we just basically move on without one team for 2 weeks and just wait? It seems like there are a lot of questions about how to do this safely, and none of the answers seem like they're really going to make it possible. But well, I'm glad that I'm not the one that's on the committees trying to figure these things out, because from my perspective, it seems like an impossible task, but good luck to them.
Yeah, I'm with you there. How are players sitting on the bench going to work? How are line changes going to work? Is everyone going to wear a bubble mask, to help, it's just like you've got all these things that, and I think a health expert says, all right, no spitting or no doing this. It's like, man, that's ingrained in these players, like DNA is that's how they play hockey is, they're going to, bend down on the bench and spit and, and spit on the ice. And it's just like, that's part of the game for a lot of these players, for pretty much all these players. So yeah, I definitely don't envy the powers that be in regards to working all that out. So yeah, good luck to them. In my opinion, if the season does return, they definitely have their work cut out for them. I would say just cancel it and look forward to 2020, 2021. But again, there's revenues involved, there's money involved. And yeah, I just hope that they prioritize health and safety over, trying to salvage some profits. But yeah, we'll see how that works out. And in the meantime, we'll be hypothesizing over here on In the Corners and kind of just doing our best to see what comes up and what comes down the pike. So on to the AHL. Sean did a little neat project that I thought would be great for the podcast, and that's kind of the reason why we've got a second In the Corners podcast for the month of May. Like I mentioned on social media, normally we do it once a month, but just can't help ourselves. We got a lot to talk about. And Sean did a really neat call-up project. Players and coaches, but we'll focus on players first who make it from the ECHL to the AHL and also from the AHL to the NHL, but just that whole ladder of progression. The percentages of guys that quote unquote make it. Sean, what goes into it? And is there any team or any affiliation system? I know it's changing all the time, every 1 or 2 years sometimes for some ECHL teams. AHL is a little more stable, but is there any team that has a greater output than the other? Just tell me what's all going into this little pet project you have going on.
So it's not quite up and running yet. I still have to finish some of the coding, as well as how I'm going to slice some of the data in particular. But basically, I'm looking at players who played in the SPHL in 16-17, taking their goals, assists, points, and penalty minutes. I'm applying a bit of a normalizing curve to them. And then I'm doing the same thing for the 16-17 and 17-18 ECHL seasons. And then basically, I'm looking at anyone who played at least 20 SPHL games and 20 ECHL games in those seasons. So they were either loaned mid-season in 16-17, or they spent the whole season in 17-18 in the coast after a year in the Southern, by God, Professional Hockey League. And then I take then I take the average of those differences of their production at both levels while accounting for stuff like age and scoring level. So let's say if someone scored 45 points in 52 SPHL games and then scored 20 points in 65 ECHL games, they'd have what's called a translation factor of 0.35, which is 0.308 per game points per game in the coast divided by the 0.865 points per game in the SP. And then I'm going to take that translation factor for all the players who played 20 games in both leagues, and that'll give me a basis to project call-ups from the SPHL to the ECHL, combining the 16-17 seasons with 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, and so on. So that'll give me a big enough sample, hopefully, because currently that's been one of the things that have been somewhat problematic is there haven't been nearly as many of guys who fit that criteria as you would think. So I've been trying to see what tweaking it a little bit does to give me a better sample, as well as see how well and how accurately that works. The other thing too is because I'm currently just using goals, assists, points, and penalty minutes. After that's done and I've decided how that's all coming together, I'm going to then redo the entire thing with point shares, the model that I use for all the graphs and stuff, to see if that produces a more accurate model than the just naked points and goals and assists that were normalized. So if one of those shows to be superior, that's the model I will go with. And then I'm not really sure if I'm going to publish it because it doesn't really lend itself to a graph for display, but I'm definitely going to use it as part of like the standings and individual game predictions going forward for like if a player has call-up guys on the roster who don't have any games played yet, of projecting kind of and using that to measure their input, what they would be for the team.
Okay. Let me interject real quick, Sean. So you're talking about like you've got like translation factors and everything. So what you're saying is like with a guy who starts out in the SPHL, of course, covering the Steelheads in 17-18 and 18-19, a guy that stands out who did play a number of games in the SPHL and then came over to the ECHL. I don't think he got quite to 20 games in the ECHL game that season, but goaltender Thomas Scholl. He was in the SPHL, in the ECHL, signed an AHL deal with Texas last season. Would there be obviously goaltending a little bit different than regular player statistics and metrics, but is there going to be different like weighted totals for points and penalty minutes and things like that from league to league? Like is the SPHL is going to be a less weighted point system with the ECHL and AHL? I know you're still working on it and still, figuring out the kinks, but is that something that you've considered as like different weights as you progress up the ladder?
Some of what I'm looking at is basically trying to see how stuff like age, scoring level, change the translation factors. So it's something that I'm considering. So like if you're a 22-year-old in the SPHL and you play your age 23 season in the ECHL, do you produce at a better level than someone who is a age 26 SPHL player that plays their 27 season in the ECHL? Does that make a difference? As well as looking at differences in scoring level. If you were an elite scorer in the SPHL, does that translate better to being a better player in the ECHL compared to if you were like an above average SPHL player that goes to the ECHL? Do you maintain more of that scoring or do you lose more of it compared to like an elite player? at that level. So those are two of the things I'm considering. As far as differences between skaters and goaltenders, as you've long heard me say, goaltending is voodoo. And trying to just project goaltenders year to year in their own league is already challenging enough. At this point, I'm not trying to extend this call-up project to goaltenders just because of how absolutely chaos the position is and how variable it is from a statistical standpoint, or even from just an eye test standpoint. So much goes into, does the goalie make the save? Like the team in front of him, the environment in front of him, the schedule he plays. Playing in the Mountain Division in the ECHL may, shield you from good shooters, or it may expose you to more good shooters. That changes every year because of how much turnover there is on rosters. Like there is so much more that goes into trying to accurately project goaltending that, like, at this point, I don't want to try just yet. It's a task that I feel like would just be a fool's errand given the limited data that I have access to at these levels. Like if I had stuff like, I don't know, high danger chance percentage and stuff like that, maybe we could talk. But with just naked save percentage, that feels very much like a fool's errand at this point.
Sure. Yeah. The lower down the ladder you go, the less statistics and everything are definitely going to be available. Advanced metrics, I should say, are going to be available at like the SPHL and the ECHL. I'd say even at the AHL level too. But yeah, I mean, start with skaters and maybe one day we'll go into goaltending. We'll start with the simpler thing and leave the goaltending voodoo to itself. So, but enough about that. You've got your work cut out for you there. Coaching, that seems maybe a little bit more manageable, of guys who have maybe started in the ECHL and AHL and have gone all the way to the NHL, or at least, from one experience to the next. Let's talk about that.
So it's funny because I actually didn't anticipate looking at coaching and stuff like that. And this isn't so much more trying to project coaches to the next level. It's just kind of taking an interest in seeing coaching trees and how guys progress. So I started looking at coaching career paths and like how those progress over time, moving up the ladder and progressing and stuff like that. And that kind of has like a set path in most people's minds of how you progress from one area to the other. Like it's something that we do a lot during our regular lives. But it's kind of strange when I started to look at that and how much professional hockey coaching deviates from that path. You would think that you start out as an assistant in the ECHL or in major juniors or in college. You work your way up to a head coaching job, learning and progressing along the way. If you're successful there, you'd land, a job as an AHL assistant coach. Basically move up to the next level and start over. You work as an assistant in the AHL for a while. You learn, you progress. If you're successful, you get a shot as an AHL head coach. Then same thing, just over and over until, you're an NHL assistant, an NHL head coach, that kind of thing. And there's some evidence that that's exactly how it works. And then there's some evidence that that's not how it works at all.
Right. Yeah. It's to interject for a second. Sorry to interrupt, but it just reminds me, it's not as straightforward a progression as you'd see like going through grade school or going through middle school, things like that. I guess for our Canadian listeners, going from, grade 5, grade 6, et cetera, moving up the ladder and going to university, here in the United States, depending on where you went to school at, you have elementary school, normally kindergarten through 5th grade, and you just make that progression. 5th grade, you're at the top of the ladder, top of the food chain. In elementary school, you bump up to middle school, usually 6th through 8th grade, and you're back at the bottom. You're back at the bottom of the food chain, as it were, but in a different schooling system. And then you bump up to 8th grade and, hey, I'm at the top of the ladder, I'm at the top of the food chain. And then, hey, you're in high school now, you're a high school freshman, welcome back to the bottom once again. So, and then you keep doing that in progression. You're a senior and you're like, okay, I've done this for 4 years, now I'm at the top of the ladder here. Go to college and boom, you're back at the bottom as a college freshman. So yeah, you've got those different levels. And it's not it's not something that is simply as straightforward as a school system setup where it's like, okay, this is my path, this is my end. Like, you just get coaches from all over that are going to be pulled from different areas, whether it's going to be an ECHL hire, an AHL hire, or even an NHL hire.
Yeah, and there is some aspects of that, so that you can see that are somewhat successful. Like you see, most NHL head coaches have AHL head coaching experience. If you look at all of the coaches who were head coaches in the NHL in this pause season, so including interim guys who got fired, 29 of 37 have AHL head coaching experience, which is a lot of them. It's far and away the majority, and the ones who don't have AHL coaching experience are typically guys who came with major junior or college head coaching experience. So it's not the AHL per se, but they were a big time head coach, and that feels like maybe they didn't take the professional coaching route. They were still in juniors or major college. That's still at least a pretty comparable league or level of coaching. But like when you look then, all right, so the best way to get an NHL head coaching job is to have an AHL head coaching job. So what is the best way to get an AHL head coaching job? And looking at some of those, you'd think if this pattern of progression would continue, that you would have a lot of AHL head coaches with ECHL head coaching experience. And of the 32 AHL head coaches from this canceled season. So including those who got fired, you have 11 that have ECHL head coaching experience, which is not a lot.
A little bit of a drop off. You've got about a third of the AHL head coaches, well, a little more than a third of the AHL head coaches that have had ECHL head coaching experiences. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is like, especially, you look at the ECHL and just the job that they do of bringing on assistant coaches that were former players. Again, I'll speak to what I know. The Idaho Steelheads, when they were coached by Brad Ralph, Neil Graham was a player. Coach Neil Graham came on after an injury and was an assistant coach, and he was an assistant coach for a number of years until Brad Ralph ended up taking a coaching job in the WHL, and then Neil Graham took over as head coach for 3 or 4 seasons. I want to say 4 seasons, until he got an offer to take an assistant coaching job with the Texas Stars. And now, well, the Texas Stars were coached by former Idaho coach Derek Laxdal. And then Derek ended up getting an assistant coaching job with the Dallas Stars of the NHL after a bit of a coaching shakeup there, and Jim Montgomery got fired and things like that. And so therefore, Neil Graham ended up taking over as the AHL head coach for the Texas Stars, while Everett Sheen, when Neil Graham left, Everett Sheen, also a former player, also an assistant with Idaho, ended up bumping back up as the head coach of the Idaho Steelheads. Clear as mud? Good. Okay. So, but anyway, so again, me speaking to what I know, me speaking firsthand experience. Now, I know some of them got to the AHL from college or major junior positions. I know Utica's head coach, Trent Cole, he started as the assistant coach in the Ontario Hockey League. Tucson's head coach, Jay Verady. Yes. Sorry. I just, all the vowels in there kind of threw me off. All the vowels, all 2 of them. Jeez. Come on, Cece. But yeah, you've got those different, coaches and everything that, have varied experience from major juniors in college. Like I was saying, Hartford head coach Chris Knobloch, Chicago head coach Rocky Thompson. They all started as assistants in the WHL, again, going back to the major juniors. Again, what I know, close to home, Colorado Eagles head coach Greg Cronin also started as an assistant in the collegiate level. Another one I want to throw in there is Toronto Marlies head coach Greg Moore. It happened when Sheldon Keefe got taken on as the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs after Mike Babcock got fired. Greg Moore was in the USHL. So you want to talk about the United States kind of major juniors program. He was coaching the Chicago Steel before he got hired on for the Marlies. So yeah, it's not as straightforward of a process as you would think, whether, you're taking from the collegiate level or the major juniors levels, or even in the affiliation levels as well.
And that's when it's you get an AHL job after having, major junior experience or major collegiate experience, that tracks with me as well. But then there are a lot of cases of guys who started in the AHL as assistants or head coaches that are former players of those teams. And that's not to imply that these coaches are bad coaches or undeserving of these positions that they hold. That's not in any way what I'm trying to imply here. My criticism would be more that if you want an NHL head coaching job, an AHL head coaching job is the best way to go about that. But to get an AHL coaching job, shouldn't you have to be a successful ECHL coach first, or a successful collegiate coach, or a successful juniors coach? I mean, hiring former players without prior coaching experience as AHL coaches it seems intuitively to me like a bad idea, especially as being a coach is a very different set of skills than being a player. I think we can all relate to having a teacher that has a lot of knowledge about their subject, but can't convey it well or doesn't connect with students. I've had lots of teachers and professors like that over my academic career, and I imagine I'm not alone in that.
No, and that's, I think, is more. I want to say that's kind of more of an ECHL, maybe even an SPHL thing. I'm not as familiar with the Southern Professional Hockey League and the coaching ranks, but I know in the ECHL, if you hire a former player as a coach, they've spent a good amount of time as an assistant in that organization, and they know the system and they know how to coach the system in that regard. But to do it at the AHL level, yeah, that kind of a little risky, I would think. And I think that's another thing that we haven't discussed yet is kind of system familiarity. Like I touched on with, Derek Laxstall starting with Idaho, Neil Graham starting with Idaho, and getting the call up through the Dallas, Texas, Idaho affiliation tree. How they do things and how they're collaborating and working together. I think having a familiarity of the system uh, definitely contributes to that. But to just hire a former player as a head coach at the AHL, or dare I even say the NHL level, I think that's a little haphazard and should be done cautiously, especially if there's no previous head coaching or even assistant coaching experience. I did want to bring up guys, really successful tenured ECHL coaches, guys like Toledo's Dan Watson, Allen's Steve Martin, Cincy's Matt Thomas, who's had a long time ECHL coaching career that dates back to the early 2000s with the Atlantic City Boardwalk Bullies. That's a mouthful. Brad Ralph, I brought him up, former Idaho coach, coaching in Florida now. They all have had long and incredibly successful track records at the ECHL level. Let's see, they've combined for 34 seasons of ECHL head coaching experience, and of those 34 combined seasons, only 6 of them were losing. They combine for literally 0 AHL games coached. You can't tell me that guys like these don't deserve an opportunity. I know, Steve Martinson, he coached a number of years in the CHL. I think he even goes back to coaching in the West Coast Hockey League in the San Diego Gulls, I want to say. When they were out there back in the mid to late 90s. And Brad Ralph, he coached in the WHL for a while before coming back with Florida, in between his Idaho and Florida coaching experiences. Man, yeah. With everything that's said, I mean, viable candidates like these, you can't tell me that Dan Watson couldn't get a job with Grand Rapids because of the affiliation and how they're doing things. Steve Martinson couldn't get a job with Iowa. Granted, I know that you've got positions that need to open up and things like that, but gosh, when teams are looking at, AHL teams are looking at filling a coaching vacancy, you can't tell me that these guys aren't qualified and that they don't have a successful track record. To me, that just sounds like a bad hiring process.
And I agree. And I mean, maybe none of them want to go to the AHL. They're happy where they are. They have roots in those cities, and they're not interested in leaving. But if you're an AHL executive and you're in a coaching search because your assistant coach or head coach or whatever is no longer there, and you're not calling these guys and checking in every offseason to be, hey, maybe they changed their minds and decided, I would like to take a crack at the A, have a path to the show. But if you're not doing that and calling guys like Watson and Martinson and Thomas and Brad Ralph, you're doing a disservice to your players and their fans, instead of as opposed to just, hey, remember that guy that played for us 2 years ago? Call him and see what he's doing.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely not you'd think it'd be more, it's kind of more of a gimmicky thing. Like, hey, we've got some brand recognition here, let's hire this guy and do that. I mean, I think a good example, and this will transition well into our next topic here, which is the AHL season awards that are being handed out. We're kind of in the midst of that right now, so we'll project a little bit, but a good example of that is Karl Taylor. So he coached the Reading Royals, and he has now earned AHL Coach of the Year by, just leading the Milwaukee Admirals to one of their best seasons in franchise history. We're talking, AHL and IHL years. I mean, the Admirals just had a tremendous season, and as did the Iowa Wild, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. But yeah, you want to talk about Karl Taylor. I mean, this is a great example of a guy who cut his teeth in the ECHL and has now started to, he got a chance in the AHL and is now really just plowed his way into a successful coaching career at the American level as well.
And Milwaukee was an absolute monster this year. No question about it.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
To his credit too, I mean, you see a lot of. I looked at the graphs for point shares from Milwaukee last year to Milwaukee this year, and there are a lot of guys that grew and developed big time from last year to this year. It's shocking how much different the 18-19 and 19-20 graphs look like. Matt Donovan, Alexander Carrier, both taking big steps forward. Trenin and Tolvanen as well. The acquiring Cole Schneider has paid off big time for him, and that was a move that was made under his tenure. Third round picks for Nashville and Novak and Pitlick look like they could be poised for big seasons next year, especially if there are shoes to fill from guys like Trenin and Tolvanen moving up. So, I mean, if you have the potential to turn third round picks into, potential NHL players, that's not only showing that you're a good coach X knows, but that you can develop guys, because not too many third round picks get to make that jump or even have the chance to. I also did want to point out that I always think it's strange with these Coach of the Year awards that they go strictly to the head coach and don't include the other hockey ops coaching staff as well as part of the award. Like, I'm sure Karl Taylor would agree that assistant coaches Greg Rallo and Scott Ford should have some share of the credit, as well as their manager of hockey operations, Ryan Costello, and Jason Nordby, their strength and conditioning coach. I mean, if a head coach is not alone in the direction of his team, and I feel like they should get a little shout out as well, if not on the award itself, definitely by us here.
Hey, and yeah, seriously, like I know that I know that awards are pretty cut and dry, when it comes to, either individual players or coaches. And of course, hockey being the culture that it is, you're going to hear guys saying, well, I couldn't have done it without my teammates, or I couldn't have done it without my, my head coaches. Apparently I'm from Fargo, North Dakota now. So I've got family in North Dakota, so I can, get back and forth into that accent really easily. But, but that's the thing, is like, you've got these awards, and like you mentioned, you've got such a great, coaching staff that is, from the top down. You need to have every guy, every cog in the machine be well oiled in regards to that. So I think that's a great observation on your part. And it's obviously something that, if a coach is getting that award, he would be remiss to neglect naming those guys. And of course, Greg Rallo, that's a name I recognize. I mean, he's just starting his coaching career off after, playing in the ECHL with the Idaho Steelheads and the Texas Stars. Long time, fixture in that affiliation as well. Again, I speak to what I'm familiar with, so I recognize Greg Rallo when I see him. But but yeah, it's like, yeah, and the manager of hockey ops and everything like that. It takes a village. You've heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it really takes a village to raise a hockey franchise as well, and to really cultivate it into a winning, just a winning organization and everything. And before we move on to the next topic, I'll say, Karl Taylor, he coached with Reading, but he also coached 3 years with the Ontario Reign when they were in the ECHL back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I guess you could call it that. But then he got the chance as an assistant coach in the AHL, and his progression seems a little more linear, in regards to the minor league professional hockey system. So he got that chance in 2011-12 with the Chicago Wolves, took a little bit of a detour, took a year off, and then came back with the Portland Winterhawks of the WHL back in 13-14 as an assistant. And then 4 years with the Texas Stars. That explains the Greg Rallo hire as an assistant coach. Okay. 4 years an assistant with Texas, and then he got hired on as a head coach for Milwaukee back in 18-19. He went 36-24-0. 36-24-16. I misread that. Got a first round berth, lost in the first round of the playoffs. But man, this year, even, 63 games played, he still had, 13 more games to play. And he already eclipsed the win total from last season, 41-14-8. He had a .714 win percentage. So kudos to Coach Karl Taylor, and what he's done there in Milwaukee. Now, let's talk about the all-rookie team. I will yield the floor to my good man, Mr. O'Brien.
So normally I would rail on the idea that the all-rookie team is literally the 3 rookie forwards and 2 rookie defensemen with the most points. But I actually agree. It happens to work out this time. That I would say it's pretty unanimous that those were the best 5 rookie skaters. But in general, I'm not a fan of looking at just like, oh, we sorted by points and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. The voodoo practitioners, aka the goalies, I am a little bit surprised by some of the selections. I will openly admit I have not watched any tape on Caden Primo yet, but man, he seems to be racking up a lot of accolades with very modest numbers. Like, especially compared to other rookie goaltenders who I thought did a better job than him, whose tape I have seen in Aldege and Joey Decord. Now, I'm not saying Caden Primo is a bad goalie, because he's not, but he definitely seems to get a lot of praise from looking at a purely analytics view. Seems to be a little bit undeserved. I'm interested, though, now to dive in and see some tape on him to see if the analytics line up with the eye test, or if there's something missing. Did he just have bad defense in front of him, or end up giving up goals that were not his fault, or a product of a combination of things?
Right. And looking at some of the other guys that qualify, I mean, you mentioned Jake Ottinger from the Texas Stars, and you also mentioned Joey Decord from the Belleville Senators. And just looking at the stats page regarding qualified rookie goaltenders, I mean, Caden Primo is at the top because of goals against. He had the lowest goals against average of any rookie goaltender with 2.45. Now, granted, you look at some of the other stats as well. I mean, Jake Ottinger had a better save percentage. I know you're a deep dive analytics guy, but just based on what I can see here from AHL.com, Jake Ottinger had a better save percentage. He had a .917. Caden Primo had a .908. And shutouts, Ottinger had 3, Primo had 4. We'll throw that in there as well. Joey Decord had a better record than those two, 15-6-2. I mean, that's pretty outstanding. And Caden Primo, 17-11-3. So, it's like you want to throw in, Gillis Sen from the Binghamton Devils in there, 17-7-2, a little bit less on the save percentage and everything. But yeah, it's like you didn't have really a standout guy that could run away with it. I'm sure maybe the voting was probably pretty close, I would imagine. But, you got a number of guys here that are just, in one way or another, when it comes to record, goals against average, or save percentage, it goes back to, what was the criteria for this anyway either? Let's see. Coaches voted by coaches, players, and media in each of the league's 31 member cities. So, probably some of the Pacific Division teams wouldn't be as familiar with Caden Primo as, whoever played the Laval Rocket that season, in the Atlantic and the North Division in the Eastern Conference. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit here. So I'll try and rein it in. But long and short of it, I feel like there was a number of people that could have qualified for it, but Caden Primo, for whatever reason, they gave him the nod. And I think a lot of these guys, especially Ottinger and Decord, like you mentioned, could have came away with that award.
Yeah, it's just something that I noticed that he seemed to, because I remember he also appeared in one of the articles on NHL.com about AHL goalies ready to make the leap. that Patrick Williams, I believe, authored, and he was mentioned in there. And I remember when I made the graph of all the goalies that were mentioned and highlighted all of them, that he was the furthest down on it of the other 8 goalies. And again, not having seen really any tape on him, I was surprised that he was one of the choices there over some of the others that I felt like were maybe a little more deserving of saying that they were quote unquote NHL ready. But like I said, I'm going to go dive into some tape and see what I can see there, because it is curious to me that he keeps getting mentioned in this area, and the numbers. I mean, 907 or 908 for a save percentage is not terrible, but it's not certainly something you would look at and see, oh, that's a future NHLer.
Right. And again, there is the eye test. I mean, that's obviously, just looking at stats, you can't really predict something just based off of numbers. And that's why there's NHL scouts. That's why there's, major junior scouts and scouts, scattered to the 4 winds across the world, is because you need kind of that eye test as to think, okay, does this kid have, the genetic makeup to make it to an NHL roster, or just, whatever goes into that scouting process. That's for sure definitely a factor in regards to what constitutes an NHL goalie as opposed to just an AHL based goalie, or further down the ladder. But let's move on to first and second team all-stars. So you made a good point here. In regards to the all-rookie team, you just have 3 forwards and 2 defensemen, where the all-star teams designate specifically you've got center and left and right wings. So yeah, that's kind of a curious thing you pointed out.
Yep, and they also did exactly the same thing that I pointed out earlier for being kind of an incredibly lazy move. Of the selections are the top 4 scoring defensemen in the league, the top scoring centers, the top scoring left wing, and top scoring right wings. Like, I mean, I guess if this is a poll of coaches and hockey ops and like local media, that they're going to be unfamiliar with a lot, and they're like, well, I got to use something. Who scored the most points? They're probably the best. But I don't know. To me, I would have made different choices based on having seen some more games, as well as having, being very familiar with the analytics I create and seeing a lot of that, which I always encourage people to go look at. But I would have put Garrett Mayhew on the first All-Star team and switched him with Batherson. I'd have put Sam Carrick in on the second team over Alex Barré-Boulet. Defense-wise, I'd have put McDonald on the first team with Alexander Carrier on the second team, and would not have Jake Bean on either of them. Jake Bean is a future NHLer for sure, but I don't think he was one of the best forward defensemen in the league this year. I also would have tried...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Here we are being polite. No, you go ahead. So I'll interject real quick. It's interesting that Jacob McDonald made the AHL second All-Star team as a defenseman, because as Colorado Eagles fans and pundits know, McDonald actually split time as a forward this year as well, because the Avalanche were so decimated with injuries that they called up a bunch of Eagles players. And so Jacob McDonald had to do double duty as a utility player, as both a defenseman and a forward. So that's probably why his stats were so padded, is because he had to play on the forward line for a portion of the season. So just a little sidebar there. Somebody who covered him in market. There you go.
Oh no, and like I took that into account too a little bit in thinking about it, where it's like because it's not like in the SPHL where Garrett Sarge just got nominated as a like second team all SPHL defenseman. Like, he was also a part-time, like, kind of back and forth, but was very much more a majority forward than a defenseman. Whereas it seemed like in my understanding of McDonald was that he played primarily defense, but took shifts at forward or had to rotate in at forward, but that was not his primary position. And I also think that speaks to his ability as a hockey player to be able to, take shifts at forward and to rotate in at forward while still, primarily being a defenseman. I think that's more of something to his credit. But I think the fact that he very clearly was a defenseman first and only utilized as a forward in emergency, that he should still get credit as a defenseman.
Yeah. I mean, that's his primary position, so that would make sense. I mean, Yeah, I mean you can't say like defenseman slash forward or utility player or something like that. But I also think that would be interesting if you know leagues would consider like utility players, guys that have played defenseman and forward. But I think that might convolute it a little bit and maybe add another element that people wouldn't be familiar as to who in the league would be a good utility player or anything like that. Um, I'm having a brain fart here. Did you talk about the goaltenders Capo Kakinen, first team All Star with the Iowa Wild goaltender, and then Connor Ingram with the Milwaukee Admirals earning that nod on the second team. I mean, did we touch on that a little bit or?
No, I think I was right about to get it before we started talking on Jake Bean. I would have put Vladar and Shesterkin as my first and second team goalies. I'm not totally shocked that they didn't get the nod, because it seems like people always want to make sure that there's like some threshold for games played. That if you were maybe not the goalie who appeared in the most games for your team, that shouldn't qualify you. So 25 games played is not enough, but 33 somehow is. Uh, that seems really arbitrary, but okay. But if like Kakinen and Ingram are both very good goalies, they're very likely headed to the NHL should there not be a logjam ahead of them. I would have taken Ingram over Kakinen as my first team goalie, but I also realize that's maybe splitting hairs. Like both of them are fine goalies. I would have campaigned more for Vladimir Shesterkin.
And that also kind of parlays into, goaltender of the year. As of this weekend, that award has not been handed out. I guess we could have waited maybe one more week to do this podcast episode, but man, I was just chomping at the bit. I was just so excited with the long weekend and everything. I just had to felt like we had to talk about it. We just had to kind of tackle all this news and everything. But like you were mentioning, you had Dan Vladar, there we go, with the Providence Bruins, Igor Shesterkin, boy, easy for me to say, Igor Shesterkin, and then Connor Ingram, Capo Kakinen. Again, it depends on what metric you want to measure it at for the best goaltender of the year. But again, you look at just wins and games played and everything. For me, I would say, Capo Kakinen, 25, 6-3 with a .927 save percentage, which isn't the best in the league, but I mean, gosh, he had 25 wins. I think that's pretty awesome, and a 2.07 goals against average. And yeah, he you know, just watching the progression of our Sinbin correspondent Robert Paneer and reading his game recaps and everything like that, Kakinen he just had a phenomenal season. I would give the nod to him for sure.
And for me personally, I think he's probably going to walk away with this one. But my ballot, if I got to vote, which I don't, would have been Vladar, Shesterkin, Ingram. Kakinen would have been my number 4 goalie. But again, it's like all 4 of them are very good and deserving of this award. So this is not, going to become me campaigning on the internet that someone was, you know, wrongfully awarded. Kakinen's a very good goalie, and if he ends up with this award, that's fine.
Right. So yeah, the Baz Aldridge Best Goaltending Award for the AHL. Yeah, I'm definitely covering this league. I'm learning the names of the awards, which is great. So Eddie Shore Award for the Best Defenseman. Moving on to the next topic. In my opinion, just looking at the stats and everything, again, it's so hard when you've got 31 teams to cover and you can't, get an eye test on everybody. But just judging by what I've read and, what I see on the stat sheet and everything like that, man, my pick for best defenseman would have to go again, another award that hasn't been awarded yet. But I would say, just based on my opinion, and again, like you said, if I had a vote, man, Brogan Rafferty, rookie, but had an outstanding season. I'm not just going to go off of how many points a defenseman scores because I don't think that that's an accurate assessment, especially for a defenseman, because there's defensemen that are, that could get this award too. But I mean, he had 7 goals, 38 assists for 45 points, which was 3rd in the league amongst defensemen. But, he also had a plus minus. Easy, Sean, easy. He also had a plus minus of 17. So I think that should play a factor into it as well, is, as a defenseman, I think the plus minus should carry a little more weight. I know you being an advanced analytics guy, you may not put as much weight into plus minuses as somebody that isn't as, well delved into that. But yeah, my vote would be Brogan Rafferty. What would be yours?
Well, yeah, I definitely don't care about plus minus at all, ever.
Right.
Plus minus and goals against average can be put into a rocket and shot into the sun, as far as I'm concerned. But I have Rafferty on my pretend ballot. I have Brennan Manel as my number one defenseman. Like I said, with goaltending, him and Rafferty and McDonald's, they're all like, that's my ballot is Manel, Rafferty, or Manel, McDonald, Rafferty. That's how I would do 1, 2, 3. But they're all, they're all in the running for this awards. Like the differences between, I think, any three of them come down to style and just who you've seen the most. I will say defensive defensemen are definitely a dying art in the way the game is going, and that's, I think, mostly because in today's hockey, you need to be able to move the needle transition. It's not good enough just to limit scoring chances in your own end. You need to be able to at least start transition, get zone exits, moving the puck, even as a defensive defenseman, and naturally translate to points. Having shutdown value and being good in your own end is, it's not so much that it's losing importance, it's that other aspects are becoming more important, especially not just your ability to defend in zone, but your ability to defend against the rush, to be able to hold the blue line on zone entry chances against. Like that's not something you think of like the defensive defenseman like Scott Stevens or Kevin Hatcher of Days of Yonder. Like that's not what you really think of them doing as being a defensive defenseman, but that's the game today. And if you are able to, affect transition positively, some points will follow. So I still think points have value, but I also think too, I look more at 5-on-5 points because if you're the defenseman who's quarterbacking the power play, it's pretty hard to have that role all season and not put up points.
That's also a good point, is for defensemen that are in that spot on special teams to quarterback. Yeah, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that. One question before we move on to the most outstanding rookie, the Red Garrett Award. Why did you not include Jake Bean, who is at the top of the list in points amongst defensemen? Why did you not include him in your 3 defensemen on the ballot?
I think for me, being it's hard to watch tape on every single player in the league, but the little bit of him that I have seen, he is a very good power play quarterback, and that's where a good portion of his point came from, which I think in my mind counts against him for awards like this, because I value 5-on-5 scoring a little more heavily, because to me that's contributing when your team needs you more. Like scoring on the power play is important, all goals count. But for me, I would have liked to have seen maybe more of his scoring come 5-on-5 than power play. So I held that against him. I also think some of his transition defense and his end zone defense left a little to be desired this year. Again, he's still a future NHL player. He's probably going to make the Hurricanes out of camp next year. But I have him as my 5th, maybe 6th best defenseman in the league this year. And I mean, that's still very, very good. Just short of, awards ballots for me, though.
That's completely fair. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious about that because I noticed Jake Bean was at the top of the list in regards to points scored. And of course, you being the diligent fellow that you are, you did much more of a deep dive in regards to not just, like you said, not just being lazy and saying, oh, well, he scored the most points, so he must win Defenseman of the Year, or at least be in the top 3. So kudos to you for that. All right. Most outstanding rookie. Who you got?
I mean, I don't see how Josh Norris doesn't take this. Like, he should easily win the award, and I think it's a little closer in my mind than what I imagine the voting is going to look like. I think Brogan Rafferty deserves consideration, but I mean, Josh Norris really, he was the guy for Belleville this year, and I think that having to carry that load as a rookie says a lot to him. Broken Rafferty, like I said, I think he deserves consideration for his season. He was incredibly good for Utica. But my ballot for this would be Norris, Rafferty, and Formenton.
Okay. For me, I would have to say, Norris, Lucas Alvenes with the Chicago Wolves, and also Jason Robertson. I'm going to throw him in there as well because, again, I go with what I'm familiar with, and Robertson, I got to see him play at the Dallas Stars training camp in Boise. It's been a couple Septembers ago now, but yeah, just to see Robertson in the buzz and to see him living up to the buzz now in the AHL after a great major juniors career. I would eventually give the nod to Norris too, because I think as much of a dumpster fire as the Ottawa Senators are, the Belleville Senators are actually doing really well in developing prospects for Ottawa in a fantastic way. I mean, when you've got Norris and Formenton as the 1 and 2 scorers amongst rookie skaters this season, both of them playing for the Belleville Senators, I mean, that's just a testament to what they're doing over there and how they're developing players and things like that. But and just keeping an eye on Alvenes and just how he's contributing to the Wolves and everything, and just trying to keep them into playoff contention as well, before the season got canceled, of course. But yeah, Norris, Alvenes, and Robertson would be my top three, with Norris obviously getting the nod because he was the guy that was tasked to lead the Sens, and he did a phenomenal job at it. 31 goals, 30 assists, 61 points, and only rookie that averaged over a point per game this season. That's pretty outstanding for Norris, for sure. Last but not least, the Les Cunningham Award for the most valuable player.
For me, this is Jerry Mayhew. This is his award, but I'm not sure if that's who's going to actually end up getting it. I mean, for me, you put up almost 40 goals. Goal scoring ability is the most valuable talent you can have, and he got it. He got that. So for me, he's also just been such a big part of that team. He seems to like he does a lot of good work in the locker room. That he's very much a leader and very much ready for the next level. And I would. I mean, I don't have any other ways to say it. He's the MVP in my mind. I'm not sure if he's going to be the one that ends up with it. I think you're going to see a lot of votes for Anas as well as some others. But my ballot would be Mayhew, Boucher, and then Norris.
Yeah, and I would say I would agree with that. Like our three picks are going to be absolutely the same. Mayhew, obviously Josh Norris with the Belleville Sens, and Reed Boucher. We've had this debate on the Sinbin before. Most valuable player, as in who is the most valuable player on their team. I know a lot of pundits and correspondents like to just pick, the top point getter or, the most visible player in regards to just how successful their team has been and everything like that. And most valuable player, to their team in the league, is I should think if you remove this player from the team, would that team, would it greatly affect that team? And that's kind of what I think of when I say, or when I see MVP and see that awarded in the NHL, AHL, or the ECHL for that matter. But man, you look at a guy like Jerry Mayhew, and he just, him and Sam Anas on that same line for Iowa is just, it was unstoppable pretty much. I mean, it was phenomenal just how he, and like you said, being the leader in the locker room and everything like that. Gosh, I would give the award to Mayhew as well. And I think he inches out Boucher in that. I think Boucher comes in a really close second, but that is mainly because the Wild were just so dominant this year. And so I think if you remove Mayhew from that equation, yeah, Iowa does pick up the slack a little bit, but I don't think Anas has nearly enough assists because of Mayhew's goal scoring ability. Like you said, almost 40 goals. He had 39 goals in 49 games, which is, that's a pretty solid stat. So I would agree as well. Jerry Mayhew for MVP. We'll see how that shakes out in the days to come, though. So
well, there is one award that isn't being handed out this year, and that is the Calder Cup. But that didn't stop you and Marlies correspondent Zack Power from looking at the first round of the Calder Cup Playoffs.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Zack came to me with that idea, and obviously, being AHL editor and hosting this podcast, some things and some ideas don't come to me as readily as they would for Zack. And Zack, being up there in Canada and Ontario and everything like that, I don't want to say he's got a better read on the pulse of hockey in general in the sport, but no, he had a great idea. He came to me. He's like, "Hey, let's do predictions as to who we think would have won the Calder Cup playoffs and the Calder Cup itself." And I said, "Sure, let's do it. I'll do the Western Conference. You take care of the Eastern Conference." And we did. And then he also came to me and said, "Well, why don't we sim it on NHL 20 too? And we'll see what it has to say as well." I'm like, "Well, yeah, let's give it a shot." And it was really funny because, man, the results were just completely bass backwards, from Zack and I's picks. Yeah, it was kind of crazy, but yeah, I'll talk a little bit. Let's go to the East. We'll just run through these real quick. Cause I posted them, or at least Simbin News posted them on social media. And then we also had the articles as well on the sinbin.net for sure. But in the Atlantic Division, you had Providence as the 1 seed versus Hartford as the 4 seed. Zach's pick was Providence takes the series against Hartford in 4 games. It's best of 5 in the first round of the AHL playoffs. And then the NHL series sim said that Providence was going to sweep Hartford. So Zach picked Providence in 4 games. NHL 20 picked Providence in 3 games. So that was one of the instances where it actually lined up.
And a model that I have that I use to predict games and playoff series had Providence as a 62.1% favorite over Hartford. So I think that is one of the few in which all 3 of us agreed that Providence was the likely candidate to win that series.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be rare that all 3 of those metrics line up. So I'm glad you contributed that in your model as well. Next, Atlantic Division first round matchup was Hershey as the 2 seed versus Charlotte as the 3. Exactly. Yes. Zack Power picked Charlotte in 5. They went the distance, not a far distance, but they went the distance. And NHL 20, the series sim, picked the Checkers to win it. Let's see here in 4. So Charlotte in 5, Zack pick. Charlotte in 4, NHL 20 pick. What did your model predict?
My model had a pretty close series, but it had Hershey as a 54.1% favorite over Charlotte. So it would have had Hershey winning the series, but it was close. I mean, anytime you're within about 5% of each other, you're basically talking coin flips. But it would have taken Hershey.
Yeah, it's kind of a push at that point. You got to have that variance to accommodate for, I'm sure, in those models. Let's see. Zack went on to the North Division. Belleville Senators would have played the Binghamton Devils. Interesting matchup in the first round since the Sens used to play out of Binghamton. So that would have been an intriguing matchup. But Zack picked, let's see, Belleville the series in 5 games. Again, going the distance in the first round. NHL 20 picked Binghamton to actually upset Belleville in 5 games. So Zack picked Belleville in 5. NHL 20 picked Binghamton in 5. And the Sean O'Brien model picked
Belleville. Belleville was a 54.2% over Binghamton. It would have, again, pretty much mirroring the Hershey-Charlotte series. Very close, but would have taken Belleville overall.
Gotcha. Yeah, that matchup would have been a lot closer than the 1 and 4 seed indicated, in my opinion, and pretty much in everyone else's, including NHL 20 and Sean's model as well. So last but not least, in the East, you have the Rochester Americans as the 2 seed versus the Utica Comets as the 3 seed over there in the North Division. And Zack picked Utica to defeat them in 4 games, to defeat the Amerks. And NHL 20 picked the Amerks, the Americans, to win in 4. So Zack picked Utica in 4. NHL 20 picked Rochester in 4. Sean O'Brien's model picked
has Utica as a slight favorite. They're a 53.9% favorite over Rochester. but they would have given the edge to Utica.
Yeah, that was another close series that I think could have gone either way. So it'll be interesting because now we've got our picks, Zach and I's picks in the conference, and then the NHL 20 picks differed from that. So we've now created, I feel like we're in Back to the Future because we've created an alternate 2020 and another alternate 2020 going off in separate timelines. So that'll be interesting. I'll just have to say, with your model, we'll just focus on the human picks. With your model for the next round, for the second round in the divisional finals. But moving over to the Western Conference and my picks, Central Division, Milwaukee is the first seed, Chicago Wolves with the 4 seed. Again, another series that I thought was a lot closer than the 1 and 4 seed indicate on paper. I chose the Milwaukee Admirals to defeat Chicago in 4 games. NHL 20 chose Chicago to win in 4 games. So I picked Milwaukee in 4 games. NHL 20 picked Chicago in 4 games. The Sean O'Brien SOB model chose whom?
It chose Milwaukee as the biggest favorite of the first round. Milwaukee was a 63.2% favorite over Chicago. I will say Milwaukee was the favorite team of the model in the AHL this season, whereas Chicago was a team that the model very much did not like.
Yeah, I see that.
For those Chicago Wolves fans who are yelling at me right now, it's only a model.
It's only a model. Cue the peasant from Monty Python. It's only a model. All right, so the next matchup in the Central Division would have been the Wild, who we've gushed about, of course, goaltending, defenseman, and the forward lines. Iowa Wild with the 2 seed going on with Grand Rapids in the 3. Let's see who they pick. Well, who I picked. Now, see, I can't even remember. I've got so many picks and projections going on in my head. I can't even remember who I chose. The Wild. I picked the Wild, but I said that the series was going to go 5 games. So Iowa in 5, NHL 20 picked Grand Rapids in 4 games. So again, NHL 20 being the contrarian most of the time, at least in these sim results. Sean O'Brien, the model projections are...
It took Iowa, 56% favorite over Grand Rapids, which I was surprised by. When I was just looking at the raw numbers before putting them into the model, I would have thought Iowa would have been a much bigger favorite over Grand Rapids, but apparently not. 56% is a very modest favorite.
There you go. So at least in the human predictions, you've got a Milwaukee, Iowa Central Division final, which I think would have just been, it would have been a great series. And I think it's going to go 7 games. Just to play spoiler a little bit for my next article coming out for the second round predictions this coming week. I think Iowa and Milwaukee would have gone the distance as well. And that would have been an exciting series to see, hypothetically. Last but not least, of course, the Pacific Division. Whenever we're doing predictions, we always go east to west. It's just how it goes. And so Tucson and San Diego, hold on to your butts because these matchups are going to be super close. So Tucson jumped ahead to lead the Pacific Division early on in the season, but started to taper off a little bit, started to come back down to earth as the season went on. So once again, Tucson and San Diego not as far apart as the 1 and 4 seeds indicate. My prediction was that San Diego made it a tight series and actually eked out a first-round victory over the Roadrunners in 5 hotly contested games. So San Diego in 5 was my prediction. NHL 20, they actually picked San Diego as well, but they swept the Roadrunners 3-0, which I was like, okay. I thought it was going to be a little more competitive than that, but we agreed. Me, San Diego in 5, NHL 20, San Diego with the sweep 3-0. And Sean, your model, you're only a model?
My model actually likes San Diego here. San Diego is a 50.4% favorite over Tucson. Which
I told you it was going to be close.
Oh yeah, I remember too when I was looking at the overall letter grades and some of the stuff behind the scenes for the AHL teams in terms of their roster strength. It was interesting to see that the model really liked San Diego as well as Tucson, but it gave San Diego a slight edge. So yeah, San Diego in basically a virtual coin flip is the tiniest of favorites.
0.4%. I love it. And seriously, I think that's what the series would have come down to. Don't forget, San Diego Gulls were in the Western Conference final last season in 2019-20. So I mean, they had the experience, the recent experience rather, to go deeper in the playoffs. And I think Tucson might have been a little, got off to a hot start, starting to come back down to earth. I think they would have ran out of momentum come the first round of the playoffs. So I guess the model barely agrees with that. But last but not least, Stockton and Colorado and Stockton rather, to talk 2 seed with the Eagles, 3 seed with the Heat. Again, a really close matchup. And my prediction would have been Colorado in 5, just another super hotly contested, just super, down to the wire, just 2 evenly matched teams. NHL 20 gave it to Stockton in 5 games. So Colorado in 5 was my pick. Stockton in 5 was NHL 20. Sean, last but not least, what did the model say?
It chose Stockton as a 51.4% favorite over Colorado. So another very closely contested series, and one that very easily could go either way.
Yeah, and there you have it. I mean, Pacific Division coming down to 0.4 and 1.4% predictions in Sean's model. So there you have it. Those are the picks. And again, we've got alternate timelines going with the human picks with me and Zack Power, and the NHL 20 Sim Series picks. So we'll stay tuned. Stay tuned to the sinbin.net and at Sinbin News on Twitter, and we'll release those round 2 predictions come next week. So there you have it. And NHL 20, Sean, I see here in the notes that you kind of have a weird relationship with the EA NHL series.
I have very much a love-hate relationship with the series. I play it a lot, despite the fact that I yell at the gameplay a lot. I very much love the building aspect of the EA franchise series of scouting and building and trading and doing all of the inner workings to build a team and a farm system and stuff like that. But sometimes the gameplay, because it looks and plays nothing like actual hockey, drives me absolutely insane. Especially when some of my AI players just do the dumbest things. I've lost count of the number of times in which there's been a 2-on-1 break coming the other way, and my winger is the one who's back, and he cheats up to try and take away the passing lane for the far winger instead of defending the guy with the puck from the far blue line, and just lets him walk in on a breakaway. And I'm screaming at the TV, "What are you doing to me?" It that, and number of times in which the pass assist or whatever will completely pass to the wrong person or something like that drives me absolutely mental. It's a game that I love because the depth of the building and scouting and all of that kind of stuff I find fascinating. And I really love that puzzle aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual gameplay frequently makes me pull my hair out.
I can the pass assist thing, I can totally relate. I'm going through the Be a Pro mode right now, and some of the passes, especially when I'm forgetting what the player assist system is called, but when you have that on, it'll tell you, hey, you can make a saucer pass like this, or you can do a between the legs pass like this.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to do that, or a drop back pass or something like that, and you hit the wrong direction and the puck goes way down the end of the ice back into your offensive or your defensive zone rather, and it's I can totally get you on the passing assist. I can relate to you on that rather, and it's frustrating. But my main thing is on defense, even in the 5-on-5 regular defensive setup, when your player assist is telling you to go cover the defenseman, you're a right winger, you're supposed to go cover the left defenseman. And then you've got the middle in the slot, and your actual defensemen on your team are not doing their job. And they just leave the guys open down in the slot, in the crease. And it's just so maddening when the defense doesn't act like an actual defensive scheme in an NHL game. And it's ugh. So again, you're not going to get it perfect. It's going to be a little different when you sim. on that note, I will say somebody brought up a good point to kind of sidebar and wrap this up. Madden, NFL Madden, they've got tournaments and stuff like that. A guy won the Madden tournament recently by doing absolutely no passing plays. He ran the whole tournament and he won. He had no passing plays. So there you go. If you want to talk about maddening simulation, maddening, no pun intended, but a Madden simulation that was frustrating to see as someone who is based in real life situations, 0 passing attempts for this guy. And and the Madden games are kind of run friendly as it is, but like, man, holy hell. So there you go. At least it's not as frustrating as that, but I digress. Let's move on. We'll talk a little bit about ECHL news and notes before we wrap it up for the podcast episode. Schedule release. Let me try that again. Schedule release. There we go. Didn't have a whole lot of fanfare and everything, but a lot of ECHL teams are starting to release at least their home schedules. And is it too soon for that, being May? Or does it kind of give fans a little glimmer of hope for the 2020-21 season now that this season is canceled?
For me, it definitely feels like a move just strictly looking for hope. It feels to me that it's pretty certain that like any start of any fall sport is going to be delayed. I really struggle to see how teams who are like, yep, we're starting in October for sure, guys.
Right.
I really fail to see how they hold to that line. Especially if the NHL is probably not going to have started the 2021 season by then, or if the AHL hasn't started the 2021 season by then. I can't imagine a world in which the ECHL is the one kicking off the hockey season in October with none of those other two leagues going. That seems impossible to me. But I definitely think it did allow the teams to give their fan base something to look forward to, a way to connect with them, or anything else to, poke the people in their market and be like, hey, we're still here, guys. We do stuff still. I understand.
Yeah, just to say, hey.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of teams are doing a very good job of still producing, good content during this time. That's one of the things I love about the ECHL is ECHL Twitter is amazing, and a lot of teams have not let me down. Earlier in the month, the Orlando Solar Bears did this big thread on May the 4th for Star Wars Day of like each team in the ECHL is a Star Wars character and explained like why this team was this character. That was fantastic.
Oh, okay. That I missed that. I need to go back and see that. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, but I will say I understand there's a global pandemic going on and front offices are furloughed or work from home, but there were a disturbingly large number of teams who were just, for their schedule release, were just like, here's a picture of our calendar with some dates colored in. That's when we're going to be at home.
Yeah. That was that's the thing, is you got to be a little more engaging, especially on social media. That's your job.
Yeah.
And again, you got to understand that, hey, okay, this is the situation. This is the world that we're living in currently with the pandemic and people working from home. But yeah, the fact is that other teams that were active and are more active on social media, they quite frankly did a better job at that.
Yeah, Rapid City for sure. I mean, they knocked it out of the park with their schedule. I wanted to run through a wall to buy tickets for Rapid City after seeing that, and I've never even been to South Dakota.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
I also thought Greenville did a really good job of releasing their schedule with the hype video that accompanied it. But I think that those two might be related, that Rapid City and Greenville both did really well. Now they share an ownership group.
Oh, yes, they do. And that kind of segues quite well and smoothly into the next topic of Spire Sports Entertainment acquiring a majority stake in both the Rapid City Rush and the Greenville Swamp Rabbits, which you would think might be a little bit of a conflict of interest, but obviously at the minor league hockey level and being in, different divisions and different conferences, I guess the league was like, okay, and from what I heard, Greenville was kind of on the ropes financially. They needed a backer, a more solid backer in regards to stay active as a franchise and to stay afloat. in the Greenville market as well. And so Rapid City was another one that I think benefited greatly from this purchase. I'll just interject real quick about an article that I actually had typed up and ready to go at the end of the season, but after a little further discussion with the powers that be of the sin bin and the leadership staff, we decided to not run this article at the time because it's a bit of a downer. 5 franchises that could fold in 2020 in the ECHL. Not exactly the best article to run, especially right after the ECHL season got canceled. So we decided against it. It was just kind of a thing. I love doing lists. I love doing hypotheticals. As do you, Sean. So I wrote this article, and Rapid City and Greenville were 2 of the 5 teams that I thought might have risk of folding in 2020, just for a nice round number, 5 franchises. But now that doesn't seem to be on the table anymore since they have both been purchased majority stake. I know Spire was, I want to say, a minority owner coming into this season, and now they own as a majority stake both Rapid City and Greenville after dipping their toe and starting to plunge in. Not just dipping their toe, they plunged head first into the motorsports world after they purchased the I'm forgetting, the charter ship. That's what they call it, the charter from Furniture Row Racing, of course, based out of Denver, Colorado for a number of years. But they purchased that charter after Furniture Row decided they weren't going to do that anymore. And now they're in the motorsports industry. But the thing is, it's an odd dynamic because, Spire Sports Entertainment is mainly like an agency. It's like to represent individuals and players. And you think that would be a conflict of interest in motorsports, and even in the ECHL. But apparently it's not.
It does strike me as interesting because there have been single owners that own multiple ECHL teams. The Steven brothers, it is, that owned the Allen Americans, Tulsa Oilers, and what was the other team that they owned?
While you're looking that up, I'll
Oh,
throw in.
the Wichita Thunder. They owned the Wichita Thunder, and the ECHL was like, yeah, it's totally fine that they own 3 teams in the same division.
Yeah, former CHL stalwarts like that.
Yeah,
Gulati, he also owned the Americans and the Reading Royals for a period there.
yeah, and that's, I mean, like, I guess if they're far enough away because the ECHL schedule, doesn't really have a lot of games scheduled against other divisions or especially other conferences, that would have been like the fact that Rapid City and Greenville are so far away. That seems okay to me, I guess. It seems like the ECHL is more interested in stable ownership than it is like any questions about like, well, if there was a Kelly Cup final between Rapid City and Greenville, wouldn't that be weird? But I always questioned when it was like, oh yeah, 3 teams in the same division are owned by the same ownership group who very clearly have a favorite team amongst the 3 of them. That I continue to think that that's not a good idea. But like I said, the ECHL seems to think that stable ownership is the most important thing. And I mean, there is some merit to that. So I wouldn't say they're completely without base, but I do see some problems that I wish there would be a little more transparency on how they are defined as separate entities.
Yeah, and the 3 franchises in the same division, that I can see as much more problematic than the Rapid City Greenville dynamic that Spire Sports and Entertainment have going on right now. I just think it can be a slippery slope. I know motorsports and minor league hockey are not like the NBA, where I think I read in an article that I'll include the link to as well, that talks about Spire Sports and Entertainment in the motorsports world, where they said, an NBA agent actually wanted to buy a majority stake in a team. I'll pull it up here and see what exactly it was referencing, but let's see here. Yeah, because like a guy like a Scott Boras or Boris, Boras, I've been covering hockey too long. Scott Boras, I think he wanted to buy. Let's see here. As an agency. Okay, here we go. Major League Baseball wouldn't allow super agent Scott Boras to purchase a franchise. Tom Condon would not be allowed to buy a National Football League team. And NASCAR has allowed the top agency in the sport to purchase the equivalent of a franchise, a team ownership charter. So there you go. I would think it's a little bit different than, like I said, a little bit different than just a NFL or an NBA or a Major League Baseball franchise, because we're a little bit lower of a level. But yeah, it's a curious thing. But again, when you have an ECHL commissioner that wants to prioritize stability, I think this is a good move.
I also think the partnership with Spire Sports Entertainment is going to do really well for getting the Greenville Swamp Rabbits name out. I know racing is really, really big in the Carolinas, as it is through much of the South, and having the Swamp Rabbits, logo plastered on the side of your race car seems like a good way to get more people who have never been to a hockey game or heard of the Swamp Rabbits to, maybe bring them into the arena and develop some new fans, whenever fans can attend hockey games again.
Yeah. It's definitely good. It's definitely good PR for Greenville to have the number 77 car of Spire Sports Entertainment running in a NASCAR race, which draws a lot of viewers in the South. And yeah, I mean, why not? That's a great promotion. I know they did that with Rapid City last year. During the NASCAR series as well, or maybe it was earlier this season, like towards the tail end of the NASCAR season. I can't quite remember. It might have been last year, I think. So yeah, I think that's great that they're doing that. But yeah, it's definitely a curious thing in regards to ownership and all that. So I think it's good for stability, like I said. So I think it'll work out, and whenever you can stabilize markets like that, it's good for the league.
Do you want to move on to the quiz portion of today's show?
Yes, last but not least, Sean has a little surprise for me. He did give me a little bit of a heads up, but he didn't tell me about topics or anything like that. But Sean has kind of a quiz for CC Hawkley, and I'm kind of curious to see how the format goes, and I'm kind of eager to test my knowledge here. So if without further ado, to finish up the show, Sean, take it away, my friend.
So I have here an 11-question quiz that we are going to call Eagles, or Legals. And
Okay.
basically the idea here is I'm going to give you the name of a person, and you are going to try and determine if the person is a former player of the Colorado Eagles, a former player of the Philadelphia Eagles, or a character from a pop culture legal show.
Okay. Okay, I think I could do this. All right.
So, all of the players have played at least 100 games for their respective team, and all of the characters are at least 50 episodes from their respective show. So, they're fairly well known, but as we move on here, the ones first off should be a little bit easier, or at least I thought they would be a little bit easier. And as we get on, they should get more and more difficult. So, you need 6 of 11 to pass the quiz here. So let's get started with Eagles, or Legals. First up,
let's do it.
Brian Dawkins.
Oh, Philadelphia Eagles.
There you go. Brian Dawkins played 183 games for the Philadelphia Eagles from 1996 to 2008. That is 1 for CC.
Woo.
So they, like I said, they are easy in the beginning. Tried to ease you into it, and we will see how we go. Second one, okay. Andrew Penner.
Oh gosh. Legal TV show.
I'm sorry, Andrew Penner played 101 games for the Colorado Eagles from 2008 to 2011.
And Penner sounds like a hockey name. I should have known better.
All right. Third person, Howard Hamlin.
Okay, that sounds like a legal TV show guy. Very alliterative.
You going legal?
Yes.
That is correct. Howard Hamlin appeared in 50 episodes from 2015 to 2020 of Better Call Saul, played by Patrick Fabian.
Well, there you go. See, I've never seen that show, so I'm even happier. Go ahead.
There you go. He has got 2 on the board here. Fourth up, Brad Chase.
Brad Chase. That sounds like a football player's name. I'm going to say Philadelphia Eagles.
You're going Philadelphia Eagles.
Correct.
Brad Chase appeared in 70 episodes of Boston Legal from 2004 to 2007, played by Mark Valley.
Oh, this game is tough. Boy, I like this. This is frustrating.
Yep.
Oh,
All right.
next. Oh, man.
Number 5, Trent Cole.
Okay, I know he played for the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's correct. He played 155 games for the Philadelphia Eagles from 2005 to 2014. CC is 3 for 5.
Not bad.
Not bad. All right. Lewis Litt.
Lewis Litt.
Mm-hmm.
How is Lewis spelled?
Louis.
I'm going to say that sounds, again, very alliterative. Very, very much a legal TV show name.
All right. So you're going legal?
Correct.
Lewis Litt appeared in 134 episodes of Suits from 2011 to 2019, played by Rick Hoffman. You are correct.
Boom.
All right. Cece is 4 for 6. Number 7, Jake Marto.
Oh, Marto. I mean, come on. That is the Colorado Eagles.
Jake Marto played in 290 games for Colorado Eagles from 2011 to 2018. Jake Marto for the Eagles is correct.
Yep. Covered him in the playoffs. So if I didn't get that one, I would be very ashamed of myself. And so would Eagles country, I'm sure.
Yep. All right. Number 8, Jason Peters.
I believe he's a Philadelphia Eagle.
You're going Philadelphia Eagles?
I am.
Jason Peters played 140 games from 2011 to 2019 for the Philadelphia Eagles. That is correct. Cece, you have
the dynamite.
Yep. Well, I apparently needed to make it a little harder, but we got the last 3 here. Now you're just you're free rolling this. You already have the 6 required to pass. Let's see if you can go for some extra credit here. Fraser.
Sure, I'll take it.
Fraser Philippic.
Fraser Philippic. Boy, that sounds like legal. Again, it just, even if it doesn't both start with F, very alliterative, very TV show sounding. I'm going to say he is a legal TV show character.
Fraser Philippic played 326 games from 2003 to 2010 for the Colorado Eagles.
Wow. Okay. Boy, I am ashamed.
I also figured I had to, dive a little deeper back in the history timeline to get you on some of these, because if I just picked guys who had played like last year for the Eagles, that really would have been a little too easy for you.
Yeah. You threw in Marto in there, and of course I knew him, but boy, yeah, Eagles country, be nice, because that was a deep dig, and I'm still learning about the previous history of the Colorado Eagles and the CHL days and the early ECHL days. So be gentle. And next question.
We got 2 more here. Number 10, Richard Fish.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say he's either a Philadelphia Eagle or a legal TV show character. Let's say legal TV show.
Richard Fish appeared in 112 episodes of Ally McBeal from 1997 to 2002, played by Greg Germain. Okay. Cece, you are killing it here.
I'm doing my best, man. This is a little intimidating, but yeah, I'm excited that I'm doing so well. That's good.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least here, number 11, Riley Nelson.
Boy, that's a really generic name that could apply to a hockey team, a football team, or a legal TV show character. I'm gonna say he was a last one, CC. Come on. Riley Nelson. That was a Philadelphia Eagle, I believe.
Riley Nelson played in 657 games from 2003 to 2014 for the Colorado Eagles.
Colorado Eagles. Silly me.
Still?
Like I said, it could apply to any of those three. So that was a good final question. That was a tough one.
I tried to make them a little more difficult as we got along here. But you went 7 for 11. That is a passing grade. Congratulations, CC. You have passed Eagles, or Legals.
Thank you. What's my? Do I get a prize?
We haven't really worked out the prize structure for quiz shows. But
so that's a no. So that's a no. Is what
that is a no. You win the pride of not getting tripped up by most of the Colorado Eagles questions. So there is that.
Oh, that's fair. I'll take that. I did get 2 of them wrong from the deeper dives.
Yep.
So yeah, I will take it. I will take this into my my quiz show winning record of 7-11. And I want to thank Sean for coming up with that quiz and intimidating me a little bit, but that was fun, man. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. I hope to see what you come up with next time, because I can only imagine there's only so many Eagles, and Legals that you can draw from. But maybe we could do it next time too. I'll leave that up to you. Zach, that sound good?
That sounds good. I have a different quiz prepared for next time if you're interested in that. That will not be Legals, or Eagles, or Legals. But we'll save that reveal for later.
Okay. That sounds like a plan.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that is everything. That has been the In the Quarters podcast for May 25th, 2020. For Sean O'Brien, I'm CC Hawkley. Thanks for tuning in on your Memorial Day or whenever you're listening to this. Be sure to download the Sinbin app. You can always catch our podcasts on there. Android and Apple devices, any podcast platform that you can imagine. We're pretty much on all of them. And yeah, it just Google Podcasts, pretty much anything, any device, we're on it. So In the Corners podcast, just search that on any podcast platform, and let us know if you can't find us, and we'll steer you in the right direction. But once again, for Sean O'Brien, I'm CC Hawkley. Thanks for tuning in to the In the Corners podcast. Keep your stick on the ice, and we will see you guys.
Thanks for listening to the In the Corners podcast. Stay caught up with the latest minor league hockey news by downloading the Sinbin app for Android and Apple devices.
All sports fans have experienced this, right? Something amazing happens on the ice and you think, man, I wish I'd have been filming. Now with the Sporfy app, you can replace that thought with a click. With just one click of a button, Sporfy captures the past 15 seconds of action so you can instantly replay and share your favorite moments all without having to film. And it's easy too. All you have to do is download the app on iOS or Android devices and experience an all-new way of filming sports highlights.